Welcome to the acclaimed podcast, The Deep Dive, featuring your esteemed hosts, Andy Monitor and Drew Dinzik, powered by BETSPERTS.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Andy, happy Wednesday. We get to put a bow on the NFC North. We get to talk about your team today. I'm going to lean on you a lot, by the way, because I got to be honest with you. If there was like a 5 teams that you were like, give me 5 teams you just have zero read on. Like you're not going to make a single bet on them in the preseason. You don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other that the market is high or low. The Vikings are in that group of 5 for me. So I'm going to lean on you a little bit here to try to gauge your temperature on your hometown Minnesota Vikings. Are you excited to talk about these guys?
You know, I'm not, again, I've made this abundantly clear over the past few years. Not a big fan anymore. I did wear a purple hat.
Sure. We all know that.
Like Goose hat. Like I'm not a big fan, but I do pay attention more just because the local media, the local, the news on, the radio on, you do pay attention to it a little more. And obviously, I have a couple local fantasy drafts where eventually we get to the point where enough beers are had and we're, Gary Kubiak's a genius and I don't see how this team doesn't win 14 games. You get to that point. So I usually have a lower expectation for the Vikings than most of the people around here. But yes, I did have I found a lot of interesting things kind of on last year and maybe the arc of the Mike Zimmer, whatever you want to career here in Minnesota so far, which it's been here longer than I thought. Honestly, the Packers, as much intrigue and drama and whatever else you want to call it we've had, it's a pretty boring handicap for them right now. Like they made almost no changes to the roster. They got their quarterback. They've had identical seasons the past 2 years, and I'm not sure what to do with them. The Vikings are probably a little more interesting because they could go a couple different ways. So yeah, we'll
all
start with them.
Okay, this is good then. Well, let's split this up then because I can do a pretty heavy lift on the Packers. I have some choice words for that franchise and for the visionaries of that franchise and the millions of
I'll
owners.
yell about the front office for sure.
Yeah, I have some very specific thoughts about the Packers, but the Vikings kind of elude me. To be honest. And I guess let's go back in time a year ago. The Vikings weren't an especially trendy pick to do anything interesting. I didn't think. Some people thought maybe they could win the NFC North, but if you polled sort of the smart people, the people whose opinions I care about, I feel like everybody was kind of cold on the Vikings to start the season. And they were kind of like,
some more Lions bets than Vikings bets to win the division.
I think I did too. And honestly, it was fair to see why. Like the defense was just death by 1,000 cuts in terms of attrition. And they were going to ask a lot at some super important positions from some guys with no experience. And we have a pretty strong signal in the NFL that doesn't go well. And so expecting the Vikings out of the gate to stumble a little bit, expecting their defense to give up gobs of yards through the air was a fair expectation. And I think we bet that accordingly. We made a bunch of money that way. This was one of the more fun over teams to bet early in the season. So. And, this 61 points against the Titans, 77 points against the Packers, 54 points against the Texans. I mean, this was a fun over team for a lot of the first half of the season. I'll see. She had 63 points against the Falcons. I mean, these were some big, high-scoring games. And these high scores weren't necessarily driven by the Vikings offense being amazing. I felt like they were always in comeback mode, always. I feel like they barely ever had a second half lead that they were really, kind of in good shape coming down the stretch over the first half of the season, and they go into their bye week 1-5, and it was kind of a lost season at that point. Zimmer, obviously, he was not was he a lame duck last year? Do you remember?
He was like in that tweener phase where it's like, can we really call this if you want to get, I can make a case that I don't think he should have been on the hot seat from a general consensus of how NFL teams normally do treat them. I would fire him today if I could. I don't know. I don't like having a defensive-minded head coach to begin with on a team. I would just get rid of him based on that and find somebody young with some fresh offensive ideas. That might help. But like the way the NFL works, I don't truly believe he was really on the hot. He was like in that group of people that are just outside of the hot seat, and like if the team really looks bad, he'll be there. And I think he got a pass just because. I mean, I can start naming. I don't know if we have enough time to name all the defensive injuries. We've harped on this over and over again. Like when you bring in rookies, when you bring in youngsters, especially on the defensive side, it's especially hard for corners. They ended up not only, drafting that, they had a wealth of draft picks. They drafted a couple corners and Gladney and the other guy. I'll have to bring him up real quick. But they, not only did those guys have to play a lot due to injuries and some of the players that they lost, it was those guys got injured. Then we went to there and we made that joke. I know I could never find it. But we joked about it after like the Vikings got to like their sixth string corner at one point. It's like, that's not an adjustment. Like the last guy was already this far below league replacement. Like this other guy's probably just as good. It's not like, oh, it's even worse. Oh, what was the Vikings? But yeah, they took a couple corners, a lot of injuries. The Diggs thing added to the draft class. You ended up getting Justin Jefferson. The beginning of the year, he wasn't really involved as much as he was. Obviously, they didn't quite know what they had there. That was the fun part of the season, I guess, if you're a Vikings fan. Honestly, the best part of the offense was the run scheming. As much as you don't want to rely on a running game, like the outside zone stuff they're able to do, Dalvin Cook is quite the talent. He's kind of falling in the category of Tractor Ceto for me. Maybe not as well, maybe as far as talent as well, and talent and potential, but I'm more thinking of a guy who's run the ball too many times for the last few years now, especially last year. He saw a lot of action. The Vikings actually didn't throw very much for, everyone sees this. Oh, Justin Jefferson, he had 1,400 yards. I mean, he's a rookie receiving record. They actually didn't throw the ball. They were in the bottom 5 of the league as far as passes thrown. And that's for a team that was, finished where they did. They were 7-9. They were behind in a bunch of games. It was a very uneven season, but yeah, you lose what was it? Linval, Joseph, Everson Griffin, your other D end across from when you had Daniil Hunter and Griffin at the ends. That was a good combination. That's what made a lot of that defensive line work. Rhodes goes to the Colts, Trey Waynes to the Bengals, Mackenzie Alexander gone, and then you said, well, we got Daniil Hunter and we'll bring in Ngakoue. Daniil Hunter's injured, Ngakoue. You know how that went. It's funny. Ngakoue still ended up being this is a joke we made numerous times last year after he was not even on the team anymore. He ended up being the season-long sacks leader for the Vikings.
Unbelievable.
For a guy who played 4 or 5 games, I'm not sure, ended up not even on the team. Anthony Barr, who is very good. Eric Kendricks, who's great, especially in coverage. Those guys missed a bunch of games. Like it was just the D tackle they got from Baltimore that I can't think of the name of.
Michael
Pierce opted out for COVID.
Yep.
Like I listen to a lot of podcasts, Drew, just for the job and because I like to.
Sure.
And I heard somebody talking about the home field, and somebody had made a case for a different team, and they said, "Boy, the Vikings too. Why do you think that defense took such a big step back?" It's because they didn't have those fans in the up in the stadium there, like, hey, buddy, that was the stupidest thing I've heard all. And we don't know everything. I say stupid shit all the time on here that's wrong. You guys call us out. I love that when it helps keep me informed when I miss a point or something. But yeah, that was rough. It's like, buddy, there was, that Vikings defense was ravaged by injuries. It was already kind of going to be a middling team. I think they won 10 games in 19. They probably weren't expected to. They expected to compete probably for a wild card, but they would have been in that purgatory of, maybe 8, 9, 10 wins. Then honestly ended up right in that purgatory too. Before the Tampa game, it was like, oh, this team's live to make the playoffs. Like,
they could have gotten the wild card.
Oh yeah, nice second half run. And really they've really just never got it in gear. I think maybe the other thing you could do to forgive Zimmer at the end of the year, if you're looking at this from the Vikings front office or even from an outside point of view, was you lose Kevin Stefanski, who ended up being the coach of the year. Like that's a big deal, I think, especially, and then all the injuries. I think it piled up to the point where, yeah, Zimmer's probably hot seat adjacent or on the hot seat again this year, but it was kind of a hard luck season for a team that really probably only finished like 2 or 3 games from their ceiling anyway. So
Yeah.
I think that's what makes it hard to evaluate. Like, man, this team had a lot of bad luck. It still won 7 games. Yeah, it's not like they were a 12-win team who had bad luck though. They all the bad luck they had was minorly offset by, holy Christ, Justin Jefferson is a superstar. And we didn't even talk about losing Diggs. Like that just kind of supplanted Diggs. Really, it wasn't maybe oh my God, this huge upside on our offensive, passing game. We used to have
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs, who's one of the
big
best in the
downgrade that was expected never came because Jefferson was an absolute stud.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it filled that gap pretty quick. So,
yeah,
the 2020 season was, like I said, uneven. You talked about the 1-5 start. I mentioned the hot, I think 5 out of 6 before the Tampa game. They got things going again. It was
crazy.
It was goofy. There was, I mean, just off the bat, you look at that, it's like, well, they face a team with a really good offense. They get a shitload of points put up against them,
and then their schedule got easy.
They face a team with a really good defense in the Colts, and they score like 11, put up like 150 yards of offense. Like when they went up against teams with definite strengths, it showed. Like, oh, this is not a team that's good, and it's not going to be good, and it just continued to get worse, especially in today's day and age when you have as many secondary injuries as you did. You need an offense like Tennessee to make anything out of a season, because having a bad secondary like that just puts you in such a bad spot for the whole game. You're just in a bad game state the whole time.
Yeah, and after kind of hearing all that and digesting it a little bit, it feels like the Bears kind of got the 7th playoff spot that the Vikings should have gotten, maybe, right? Like the Vikings should have finished with a winning record. They shouldn't have finished 7-9. This was a little bit better than 500 team and a little bit better than 500. Actually, a little exactly 500. Didn't the Bears got in at 8-8? They finished 8-9 with their loss, right? So
even after a couple losses, the Vikings had a chance to get into the playoffs. Like there was a scenario where they could get in week 16 still if things went right. I don't know. It was minor, but
just an absolutely crushing loss in prime time to the Seahawks. That was just amazing that they blew that. You remember they had a chance to put that game away at the end?
13-0 at half. And
no, they had a chance to put that game away in the fourth quarter, and they effed it up. They had a chance to. I can't believe they lost to the Cowboys. That Cowboys loss was just, what in the hell happened? You're rolling. You're back on track. You're 4-5. You got a couple more easy. You got a 3-game. They were 4-5, and they had a 3-game stretch coming up of Cowboys, Panthers, Jags. You had Andy Dalton, Teddy Bridgewater, and Gardner Minshew coming to town. 3 in a row at home. You probably are thinking, oh, we're going to be 7-5. We're in the mix. And they dropped that game to the Cowboys. Was absolutely inexcusable. They did hold on for dear life against the Panthers and the Jaguars. They beat the Panthers by 1. They beat the Jags in overtime. Remember that Jags game? We talked about this already in the Jags preview. 51 points. Landed that with the overtime field goal.
A tiny middle. It was not even a very big middle. Landed in a pretty small middle with an overtime score. Very odd. And I guess, and you brought up a good point with like couldn't close it. I think that was kind of the theme. Like it was a team that had a bunch of hard luck. Somebody in the chat mentioned this. I hadn't even got to the offensive line. It was bad. And, the offensive line it's still probably not going to be fixed this year. That was a big issue, but they did have a problem on late downs, like bad 3rd down calling, bad 4th down decision making. And then you remember the one game where the kicker missed like every kick. And we had to, that was like, oh my God, we're watching the end of his career right now. He was good last week and now he's horrible. So, I mean, just some weird end of game stuff, end of game and end of drive. Cousins took a bunch of 3rd down sacks. There was a bunch of really poorly called 3rd down and 1 run plays. It's like you have these unique running plays that we see during the whole game. Then on 3rd down, you run what somebody would call at a Pop Warner game, like, and everybody sees it coming. So it was hard to keep sustained drives going. And again, probably based on points, they were, their what their Pythag was 8-8, 7-9, right around there. But
Sure.
they probably could have done worse. Although I really do think they landed right where they should have been.
Oh, just a crushing loss to that. A couple of just crushing losses in this mix here, man. Yeah, losing to the Falcons after the Falcons fired Dan Quinn, that hurt. Again, losing to the Seahawks when you are up. I'm trying to pull up the play-by-play, but the ads on the internet nowadays are so freaking insane. It is just impossible.
I remember what you were talking about. I think Seattle scored 21 straight in the third quarter.
They scored 21 straight in the third quarter.
God, it's going down.
The Vikings rallied to be up 26-21. They had the ball inside the red zone, I believe. It was fourth down. Rather than kick the field goal and go up 8 points, they went for it. They didn't get the fourth down. Russell Wilson drove it inside of 2 minutes and got DK Metcalf for a touchdown. That's just off the top of my head. I don't fact check me on that, but that was a heartbreaker. And it was indicative of the season. And I think you were right. I think the loss of Kevin Stefanski was felt. I don't know that we really got much of an identity of this offense, even through 17 weeks, through 16 games. There were still some head scratching moments where you didn't exactly get what the plan was. Like, even in wins, at the Bears, scored 19 points, even though you got 400 yards of offense.
The Bears game too. That was another one where they squandered some possessions on the opponent side of the 50. And when you do that sort of thing and your defense is where it's at, it was like the Tampa game too. Honestly, they were kind of in that at the beginning.
They were in that game. No, they were very in that game.
They needed, they needed 17 or 21 points, not what they had. And then Brady went touchdown. And, I think the Tampa ended up with like 25, 28 points or something like that. It was like, 26, 14, they could have ended up, with a few more points early on and we'd have got there. So again, I think we're going in circles here. I'm not sure what to make of this 20 season. It was one of the weirder ones as far as like what happened with the roster turnover / injuries / losing a very important coordinator and then still ending up not being just some garbage tanking team. You ended up in the middle of the pack. So, I mean, where do you go from there? We know where they went. I'm not sure where I would have went. We can talk about that when we get to that too. But yeah, the offseason changes were at least attempted to address the biggest problem. I think the biggest problem probably is still the defensive line. If you want to throw or the defensive secondary, and then a running mate for Mr. Danielle Hunter on the other side of the defensive line. But they did draft an offensive tackle. They even got some more trade capital when they traded back. They still got the guy they wanted. They actually took a starting guard from Ohio State who. It doesn't matter if it's a third rounder. This guy was a starting offensive lineman for a team that's, a playoff team. So they got two good young offensive linemen that'll probably contribute. And then I guess if you're the Vikings, the hope is that all these young cornerbacks that got, just absolutely baptism by fire last year. Some of those guys have to step up in camp. And I think maybe the most important thing they did outside of drafting an offensive tackle was bringing in the corpse of Patrick Peterson. That's not fair. He's probably still okay. He can play in this league. He's not good. He's serviceable. But if there's anybody that you can bring in to help teach these young corners and these young D-backs something about the league, bringing in a couple of experienced D-backs wasn't the worst idea in the world, I think. You get Mackenzie Alexander back, you bring in Patrick Peterson, you bring in a couple other guys. Maybe that helps educate this. Harrison Smith is very good. But yeah, Gladney and Dantzler struggled. Patrick Peterson.
Yeah. Is Gladney even on the team or is he in jail?
Yeah, Gladney. For now, he's on the team.
For now, okay. That wasn't even a tongue-in-cheek question. I wasn't 100% sure. The off-season moves were entirely, it felt like, focused on addressing the weaknesses. They identified their own weaknesses fairly well. We can't rush the passer. We can't cover players. And we have issues pass pro. And that was where they went in the draft. They went in the draft for pass pro. They went in the free agency for defense. We will see if that works. I don't have a ton of high hopes that Patrick Peterson can be a cover corner. Neither do I have high hopes for Mackenzie Alexander for that matter. I would
Be all right in the
say
slot. I'm not excited.
he can be all right in the slot, but that means you're going to have Cam Dantzler out there on the edge probably. And Dantzler really, really looked rough last year. Who were the other guys? Yeah, Harrison Hand, Josh Metellus. These were all
lot of people,
relatively
a lot of
young
people start.
secondary
Yeah, and
places.
somebody did bring up. Yeah, Gladney was released.
What's up with?
I was trying to remember if we actually just cut bait on that or not. Thank you, Rick Daddy 69420.
I don't remember when they did this, but they did sign Rashad Breeland.
Yes, that was the other. We'll call him veteran. Yeah, I'm going to call him veteran. Bringing in some veteran presence with
Breeland
some
and Peterson,
shitty young ones who got a bunch of experience last year. So I mean that helps. So if the addition of some, and Breeland's not bad, Peterson's getting up there in age. Like if the addition of Peterson and Breeland, and obviously bringing back Mackenzie Alexander, familiar with the system, can be okay in the slot. Kendricks and Barr don't miss like 20 games together. Daniil Hunter plays. You got Delvin Tomlinson up front. Pierce comes back from COVID. Like, I'm much more confident that this defense returns to a good defense, like we saw a couple years ago, than I am for like Christian Darrisaw and this Davis from Wyatt Davis from Ohio State, from instantly being really good. Instantly being really good offensive linemen, especially with the, Bradbury again, another high pick at center, but I think Ezra Cleveland was second or third round pick so at least
second round pick last year. Yeah.
Going forward, you have four pieces of this offensive line that are like very young.
Yeah.
So that and cheap. So I mean,
a lot of draft capital
built in there. So.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the team chemistry a little bit. I think that was I didn't love their draft. I didn't hate it. I think they got good value for the pick they traded, but I wasn't like jumping out of my seat that they took Kellen Mond when they did. But it's a third round pick. What else are you gonna do? So I don't know. As we look at the
that was a weird pick.
As we look at the team chemistry here. This is where things get weird.
Yeah, as the chat is just absolutely arguing about the COVID vaccine, we will say we're going to stay, pretty agnostic about all the arguments, just like doing anything with the election last year. I don't want to sit and argue politics on this because it's what it's turned out to be. But let's say what percentage of, the general population is, one way or the other on vaccination. Like it's definitely, it's not 90-10. Like it's certainly split.
In LA County, it's probably 80-20 where I live.
Yeah,
Minnesota is probably close to 80-20 too, right?
It depends where people are from and their backgrounds and stuff too. But it is interesting. This is going to be interesting.
You're from a healthcare community, man.
Yeah,
what's the percent vaccinated in Rochester, Minnesota?
It's got to be 80. It's pretty high.
It's got to be high.
It's pretty high. So the things we will say. The things we will say about, the non-vax for Mr. Cousins is it causes an issue with the fact that if you're not vaxxed, you get tested a bunch more. And that what we saw what happened in Denver, like that is an absolute nightmare scenario. If you're starting like Adam Thielen at quarterback next week or something, because it doesn't matter if it's a false test, if it's asymptomatic. I don't care if I don't want to hear the shit like it's a disease that 99.9%. Yeah, I don't care about if Kirk Cousins gets
the NFL gave you a set of rules.
He is going to miss if he gets it because he's getting tested constantly. He is going to miss games. He could end up missing all the quarterbacks could get washed out like that. So it does create a weird situation when one of your most important positions is going to be one of the guys who gets, more regular testing. So that's rough. And then also just like the people on the team who are, I'm sure, I don't know everyone's politics on any of these teams. I'm sure there are a bunch of people on the Vikings who are very, very for vaccination.
Yes.
It's going to create a weird vibe if the leader of your team is outspoken the other way. I
couldn't agree more.
it's like if we had, and you compare it to the election, what I was talking about earlier. It's like if these people, these NFL players had to sit up there and talk about politics after each game, like, hey, who did you vote for last year? And then it created friction. And so
Sure.
it's going to be a weird team chemistry thing with the Cousins thing. And then,
It's already weird between the coach
it
and the
already,
quarterback.
it already is kind of weird.
I mean, the NFL gave them a set of rules. The coach is trying to put pressure on this team to prevent them from having to forfeit games. I don't know in any way, shape, or form how you coexist with your quarterback who is determined to risk losing games because of this particular issue. I'm not. I don't.
And somebody in the chat says it, like, Nick says Zimmer is clearly pissed about it. So not only do you might have a weird vibe with the team, the leader of your offense and team essentially is not in a good place with the head coach. So everything I said, like, hey, the defense gets better because of these additions. The rookies are playing up. All the players who are hurt are back. The offensive line clicks. All that could go to pot if this team chemistry sucks. You do need a team to gel, or a bunch of players just miss games.
How about the team chemistry between Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins that's not vaccine related?
Yeah.
Jefferson had some choice words about his quarterback in the offseason.
That's true.
And I think the prevailing impression about Kirk Cousins at this point among league circles is, this guy's ceiling is the top half of this guy's ceiling is median NFL quarterback is best case scenario for him. We're not really expecting him to come out and get EPA per play that hits top 10.
Quarter of a standard deviation above median.
Okay. All right. You want to give him his ceiling is the 57th percentile ish.
Like
58th percentile.
If he's standing there and median is his height, he can spike his hair.
He could spike his hair. Okay.
That's where he goes. Okay. Just a little bit above. He is just slightly above average when he's good.
Is that because of Kirk Cousins, or is that because of Justin Jefferson, and Justin Jefferson knows it?
Well, that's the other part too. Like, he had Diggs and Thielen. He's gone now, but he always had a good tight end in Rudolph. Irv Smith probably can pick up some of that slack. We don't know what his ceiling is. The offensive line playing as poorly as it did in pass pro, maybe I give Cousins a little credit for that.
That never helped. Yeah, that never hurt.
That never helps.
It never helps. Yeah, when you're that poor, yeah, for sure. But so it's and okay, the context there really is the O line has never been good for Cousins in Minnesota, never. So it's not like you were taking a situation where everything was great, and now we're giving him a bad line, and we don't. We're not doing the Raiders Derek Carr thing, where we had a very strong unit and we're making it poor, and we're going to see if he can handle it. We're doing it's always been poor, so there's really no adjustment to make here. We know he can kind of play at his level with a poor O line. And I honestly, like, it's, I can't really tie any results I can't really, their offense was pretty consistent throughout the years, independent of whether they went up against a team that had a really good pass rush or not. You can make a case there was a couple pass rushes that had a really great day against them, and they lost those games. But this is a team that went out and generated 400 yards of offense every week, outside of a couple of random outliers. So, they should be able to score points. They should.
Yeah.
And if the defense, good.
And this is how I'm gonna pose this question, because the next topic is defensive upside. I feel like I've covered that already 6 times by just talking about it was so blended into what happened in 2020 with the massive cluster injury across most of the defense. / you had a COVID opt out, you had Ngakoue in and out, you had a lot of issues at the defense. The defense could be good. And then you say counterpoint, Andy, it's 2020. Does a great defense really make a team good? Counterpoint to that, this team scored a shitload of points last year. They actually scored a lot of points. Counterpoint to that, well, it's because they're a bad team and they're behind. So take all that, what I just said there, and try to translate that from gibberish into, do you think with the defense will be better than last year unless the injuries occur again? But if the defense takes a decent step forward, gets into the top half / top 10, does it make a big enough difference to make this team, competing with? And again, when we get to the schedule, you'll see they play the NFC West. like there's going to be 1 to 2 wild cards out of the NFC West more than likely, I think. And that's a big state. If you can take that step forward and you can beat a couple of those teams, that puts you in the playoffs, because all of a sudden you have a tiebreaker against, let's say the second or third team in the NFC West. You end up with 10, 11 wins, and you end up in the playoffs. Or does a good defense not do enough for a team that's led by a mediocre, slightly above quarterback with a really young offensive line, and based on a offensive scheme that's kind of based around a running back at times?
I mean, in the same sense that that we talked about how and we will talk about it again in ad nauseum. The Packers had an easy schedule the last 2 years. The Vikings had an easy schedule the last 2 years. So I think, and this year their schedule is fucking brutal. And we're going to get into this in a minute, but I think that's going to dictate a lot of how they finish in terms of wins, losses. But in a relative sense, I don't know. Staying on defensive upside, did you see the Athletic article where they ranked all 32 defenses and they put the Vikings number 1?
Yeah, that was
was that a troll?
I don't know. Like I guess they must, and really the crux of that, they must really think highly of 2 things: Patrick Peterson and whatever is going to start across from Daniil Hunter, whether it's Weatherly or a couple other guys that are probably in the. I think honestly, the other defensive end is going to be kind of a rotation, which has worked for teams. We've seen the Patriots do that a couple years back with a bunch of successful guys that were rotating in and out. So I think their ceiling is maybe like top 8, if everything. And that is like Patrick Peterson has a resurgence under Zimmer. Breland works out. Harrison stays at the top of his game. Both linebackers, Barr and Hendricks, play really, really well, and the D line gets a shitload of pressure. Like everything has to, and the young corners have to play well. Like I don't know how you get this team to 1 with some of these other defenses.
I don't either,
like,
man.
Just inside the top 10, I think is the ceiling.
If you read the little snippet, a lot of it was, hey, Mike Zimmer is one of the smartest defensive minds in the NFL. They finished first, third, and fourth in defensive efficiency from 17 to 19. They were somewhat figured out, I felt like. Zimmer's scheme, what he does, like his plan A is always very good. But if you can anticipate his plan A, you can put him on his heels a little bit. That's kind of the way I've always felt about the Zimmer defense in general. And so I don't know if he's got his fastball still in the NFL. And I don't know if this unit is good enough. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Stephen Weatherly, he doesn't move the needle for me. Not at all. Dalvin Tomlinson, he doesn't move the needle for me. Michael Pierce, Danielle Hunter coming off of Michael Pierce coming off of the COVID absence. Again, I got questions about how effective all those guys are going to be. Danielle Hunter, at least his absence was injury related. So he was at least involved in team facilities and, getting treatment and working through his issues. So presumably he can be close to his ceiling, because Danielle Hunter is a guy that we always felt like was on the bubble of defensive player of the year talent wise. But now that he's on a line by himself effectively in terms of pass rush, and you could put 2 hats on him, I'm not sure how effective he'll be. Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, those guys are getting old, man. I mean, not old for this earth, but old for this league. And they're
both
Patrick
under
Peterson's
30,
old.
but not by much.
Yeah, Patrick Peterson's getting older. Harrison Smith is Patrick Peterson is old for this league. Harrison Smith's getting older. Rashad Breeland, I like as a player. He probably is sort of the one guy that does sort of quietly move the needle for me more so than the market would have him in terms of an impact. So I mean, I guess, will this defense be better than last year? 100% yes. You can say that with high confidence. Will they be in the top 10? I think is a reach. I think this is a top half of the NFL defense. And if things break right, I think exactly like you said, 8. I'll give them 8. If they get to 8, everything went right.
Yeah, that's fair. And, we did this with the Bears and the Lions on Monday. And we're going to do this all, the rest. We're going to do 3 more weeks of this. When you talk about a team's schedule, and that's why it's not a really big deal inside of a division, like outside of, a team having a first place schedule coupled with a bunch of bad breaks with rest and a bunch of bad breaks with scheduling. Like the schedules are going to be kind of similar within a division. It's a tough divisional schedule for this entire division. Everybody has to go play the AFC North and the NFC West. And then the
The
Vikings
West,
also drew the Chargers, who are very up
yes,
and coming.
very
The
good.
Cowboys, who should be good at least on one side of the ball, and then have to play a Packers team that we'll get to here. That's coming off another 13-3 season again against an easier schedule. But yeah, let's take a look at this schedule. There's a lot of color on this one. If you're watching on the stream, if you're listening on the podcast, obviously Drew always tweets those out the next day. Take a look for the Vikings schedule. A good whale. I like this one. It has the cool mustache.
This is a great one. I love this one.
Outside of the normal situational rest stuff, the biggest thing that sticks out to me that you end up every year, obviously playing your divisional foes, getting both the Green Bay and Chicago away games in December. That's not great. Like you're a dome, you're a northern team, but you are a dome team, and playing both of those outdoor games late in the season, having two teams coming off a bye right in a row. Having the weird travel spot there from the Detroit spot to Carolina, the opponent you have opponent on back-to-back ones, but you have three of those oranges where you're on the second week of a back-to-back three different times right off the bat. Again, against middling to slightly above middling teams, the first two, Detroit might not be good, but there's a bunch. Detroit's coming off a Thursday night game too, so you have a bunch of disadvantage spots here.
The back-to-back travels are interesting because one of the two legs is a West Coast trip every time, which so it's not like you got to go at Detroit, at Chicago, oh, big deal, or at Green Bay, like a couple of short bus rides. Like this is Cincinnati and then Arizona, Baltimore, one side of the country, then Chargers. God damn, I'm gonna have a lot on that Chargers. That Chargers on week 10. That's gonna be a great spot to bet the Chargers. Similarly, you got to go at San Francisco and then Detroit. So you have a West Coast trip every time, which is tough. Although I will say this is a tough schedule. The opponents are difficult. There is no denying that that they have their work cut out for them. This starts a lot easier than the rest of the NFC North. In fact, up and through week 8, you really only have 2 likely L's on here.
Really, and they're all coin flips, man. Like the Seattle game.
You're going to lose to Cleveland. You're probably going to lose to Seattle. But the rest of those games you should win.
Yeah, that Cleveland. I don't know what that Cleveland line is now.
I don't either, man.
I'd go look at that. These are obviously we're still
be favored in that spot.
Just to be fair, we didn't want to adjust these, and obviously it'd be silly to try to do all that extra work just for you guys. But we just stuck. These are all from the same snapshot in time for all these schedules, no matter how late in the summer we're doing these. These are all the opening lines when you're looking at. But outside of the Cleveland, it's at home. You get a three game home stretch there.
You're home dog to Cleveland. You probably lose.
And that's your airplane there on the Carolina game. Is that coming off of like, hey, we had 3 straight home games, and now we have a stupid game against a middling team on the road before we get to vacation.
Yeah, gross.
Maybe I'm staying in Carolina. Maybe those people are going to the Outer Banks afterwards, and they don't give a shit about that game.
Charlotte to the Outer Banks is Charlotte to the Outer Banks. That might as well be driving from New York to Florida. It's such a long drive.
I have no idea where Charlotte is anymore. Apparently,
it's so far. Even Raleigh to Outer Banks it feels like an eternity. But yeah, that is funny. But yeah, you got a lot of winnable games. Your opener is very winnable. You get to take on a Joe Burrow coming off of his ACL. Your second game, you might get. I'm kind of intrigued potentially as Minnesota as a field goal plus dog at Arizona. That's a nice little matchup there for them. There's a lot of decent spots for them in the first 8 weeks of the season. It is entirely likely, in my opinion, when they get to week 9, taking on the back-to-back of the Baltimore and the Chargers, that this is going to be a team that is overvalued by the market. And this is going to be a team that's probably going to be at the top of the standings in the NFC North, considering how tough some of the other NFC North schedules are. So I guess if you have a modicum of hope that the Vikings can get to that top 8 defensive kind of number, you might as well bet them to win the NFC North now, because it's going to get that's going to get shorter. Do you agree?
Yeah, and like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we are looking at the lines that we pulled, like a month ago. So that Green Bay game that falls right in the middle. So at Baltimore, 7-point dog. It's back to
Yeah,
back
right.
at Chargers. From East Coast to Minneapolis down to the West Coast to play the Chargers. 3-point dog. That'll get bigger, especially if Herbert repeats his freshman season there. Green Bay at home in between the LA and the San Francisco game, I would expect them to probably be a dog at that point. They're not
Like
gonna be
those four games,
and
they're
then
just gonna
at
get
San Fran.
absolutely. That's like a face melting 4 games.
So yeah, after the Dallas game,
My
or
God.
maybe after the bye, you probably take some Green Bay,
Oh
and
my
you just
God.
move on with your life.
Oh my God. That is a face melting 4 games.
It's
Baltimore,
not great.
Chargers, Packers, Niners. Wow. 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 Wow.
Start naming pass rushers in those 4.
You got there's a lot. Justin Houston and Bowser for Baltimore. You got Joey Bosa for the Chargers. You got P. Smith for the Packers, and you got Nick. You got to play Nick Bosa for the Niners. So yeah, your pass rush in that quartet is gnarly.
If that young tackle isn't working out, that'll be a rough stretch for life for a Minnesota Vikings fan. You mentioned betting the NFC North. Should we talk odds? Take a look at what kind of price we can get on that before we move on to the Jordan Love led Packers.
Let's do it, man. The Vikings are 40-1 to win the Super Bowl. They are plus 1750 to win the NFC North. Excuse me, plus 1750 to win the NFC. Neither of those numbers is bettable. I don't think this team even has remotely close to a ceiling where they're going to get to a Super Bowl. The NFC North price of plus 225. See, now this is the other thing. It's going to get shorter just because they're going to get some wins in the first 8 weeks and the Packers may stumble a little. But is it going to get that much shorter, or are people always going to believe in the Packers? Right? Like market elasticity is something that I've been thinking a lot about when I've been evaluating market entry and stuff for this upcoming season. And there are some teams that the market is not, they're not going to give up. If the Bucks start out slow, if they're 1-2 or something, the market is not going to quit on them. They ain't quitting on the Bucks. Like that, the same with the Chiefs. The Chiefs are 2-3 or 1-4 if everything goes wrong. People aren't quitting on the Chiefs, right? But a team that that overachieved last year, or a team that people don't really believe in or they think is a public side, if they stumble, like the market's going to dump on them quickly, right? So there's sort of like in the back of my mind, there's sort of an elasticity in terms of how quickly people will give up or buy into a team being good or bad. And I don't think people are going to quit on the
People
Packers.
Don't give up on Packers. No, you could probably get north of 2-1 for a long, and unless Minnesota really wins some games they shouldn't, and Green Bay drops a couple they shouldn't, it's plus 175 might be the floor on that. Even 6-7 weeks in, it's just not going to get crazy because if you go and bookmakers know what people want to bet. People want to bet on a team who has the MVP, who won 13 games the past 2 seasons and went to, I just roll right into the Packers preview apparently, but like people will want to, oh my God, the Packers are cheap. I should bet them right now.
I should bet
they
the
can
Packers.
win.
I'm already thinking that.
Yeah, I'm going to. Yeah,
I'm already ready.
We're not making fun of like Joe Public. We might do this.
Yes, of course.
This is for sure a thing. So yeah, you could probably bet that now or wait to feel it out. Maybe watch some preseason games, see what you think. Kind of a good question in the chat from Maple Metrics. Any Kellen Mond long shot offensive rookie of the year potential a la Dak a few years ago? Kellen Mond kind of sucks. So I hate that, but like I like where your head's at. I like thinking outside the box.
I have no idea if he's good or bad. I assume he's bad, but I don't know.
You never know. I don't know.
Never know. It's a very similar-ish kind of deal. Although Kirk Cousins is not Tony Romo with the broken back.
No, but I mean, if you have $20 that you want the books to hold for a little while, if you hit it, that's a hell of a.
What do you think that price is? It's probably like 500 to 1.
I don't know if it's all that big. I'm going to take a look
I would
here.
play 500. I would play. Well, Dak was 500 to 1. That's why
Yeah,
I said.
I think they learned their lesson on that. Like
Oh,
for that,
okay.
it's kind of like Leicester City was lesson. Or Reed kills me because I throw an I in there.
Wow,
But yeah,
Leicester. Who are they? I've never heard of
Leicester. I
Leicester.
know. I
Never
can't.
heard of
It's
it.
like John Eisner.
Leicester? You mean Leicester?
Leicester. But yeah, I mean, team books learn like, oh shit, we don't want to do that anymore. So,
All right,
take a
well,
look if you can get a big price on Mond. There's worse bets you can make. Like
yeah.
I've made some bad bets over the years.
Either way, I'm not playing to win the North at plus 225. Not a good enough number. I'm not playing to win the playoffs, to make the playoffs. Yes, at plus 110. Not a good enough number. I have them making the playoffs a little under 45% of the time. So I would need closer to plus 150. And then the regular season win total over 8.5 is juiced to minus 160. No, thank you. Under 8.5 is plus 135. It feels right. That feels tight. It doesn't feel bettable. Do you agree?
Yeah, everything's kind of there. Like again, the only thing I could possibly even think about betting is probably to win the North if you do believe in them. I found a Kellen Mond is 66 to 1. I can't bet that.
That is brutally bad. I want nothing to do with
Don't
that.
bet that. And yes, thank you for the update on Mr. Oosthuizen. He did withdraw. Honestly,
Really?
this is like a tennis withdrawal where you just make up an injury. Like, yeah, he's got bigger fish to fry. There's some money to be made in the playoffs. So,
all right. Well, let's get to the promo and then let's talk some pack.
Yeah, I'm speaking of the promo. I'm going to ask my PrizePicks people what happens when you might have made a PrizePicks entry with Louis in it. I'm assuming I might have made a few more golf ones today. Having some fun trying to figure it out. Apparently, there were two ways to bet golf. It was over under amount of birdies in the first round, and then just over under score. Like you can just bet their golf score for the round.
Is it like points betting?
Yeah, no, but you combine them. You have to combine at least two. You can go up to 4. So yeah, real quick, PrizePicks, new DFS sponsor the show. If you use the promo code Deep Dive, you get $100 match, which is 100% of your deposit if you put $100 in, up to $100. And yeah, you pick 2 to 5 players. It's prop betting, prop prognosticating, and you can win up to 10 times in an entry. And yeah, the biggest thing I noticed too is, again, I mentioned this last time, you're not up against a bunch of DFS people who know what they're doing. It's you versus the player props. If you have any questions, hit me up. But yeah, please do support the podcast if you like these previews. Just, man, download this for me. Do it for me, for Andy and Drew. It would help me.
I like
don't ask for much.
Prognosticating. They can have that one for free.
Oh, yeah. I'm not giving them that for free. I'm gonna invoice them for that. But yeah, and also you can do mixed. I was kind of hoping to have something together for tonight, for tomorrow, because there are preseason NFL props up to be bet right now, or to put into an entry. I didn't have the time or the bandwidth to figure out
NFL props. Oh, that's cool.
To figure out how many passing yards will Mac Jones have tomorrow? Like you do. I think this is actually probably more beatable.
My model has him at 96.5.
Well, it's 84.5. We're going over there.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah.
Oh, interesting. Might have a little Mac Jones prize pick on my hands.
Mac Jones. And speaking of the Washington New England game, little surprise for anybody who made it an hour deep, or not quite an hour. Halftime show tomorrow.
Oh, yes.
Halftimes are happening. We will be doing our very first halftime show. This is not for real. Well, I mean, it is, but these NFL players.
This is going on our permanent record, man.
Yeah. These NFL players get preseason. The refs get preseason. Everybody needs a preseason. We need a preseason to get back into halftime shape. So we're going to do a couple of these. And there is a nationally televised game on a Thursday night. We're comfortable on Thursdays because that's when we normally do one. So the football team and the Patriots take each other on tomorrow. I want to say 7:30 Eastern.
What's your opinion about what's the most important handicapping angle for preseason football? Is it information about who's playing? Is it coaching tendencies about what coaches care? Or is it just like strength of the depth of the team? Which of those three do you think is the most important?
It is really a big. There's some combinatorics. What's that word?
Combinatorics.
Combinatorics. I can never say that one either.
Combinatorics sounds funner.
That's not a word. You can
No.
combine things. You need to combine some of that because if you have a team and a coach that's like motivated to win in the preseason, that's one thing. But if they have zero depth on the third string and their third string quarterback is somebody who might not make the team, and the other team has some actual depth on defense, you're going to lose a game in the second half with a bunch of players out there you've never heard of that aren't even going to be on the field or aren't even going to be on the squad come September. So kind of, take a look at that, maybe bet some first halves, look at some things. A lot of people are on the Jets this week. I'm seeing that with the kind of I've heard a couple people make the case, and this sounds stupid. This sounds absolutely ridiculous in September, October, November, but people have made the case that, Saleh wants to kind of assert that, hey, the Jets might be the team now around here, and we're not going to be a joke. And then you got another team that's having fist fights in practice. I heard a couple people make cases for this. Adam Chernoff made an all right case for this, and I'm like, if you tried to make this fucking case during the regular season, I would DM
People
you
would
and
laugh
make
you.
fun of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
But I'm like,
Laugh
during the
you out of the room.
preseason, I'm like, I can almost buy this. I know a bunch of people that bet the Jets, so maybe I'll have a few
You're
bucks in
saying
the
go to
Jets.
narrative town is more
Narrative
important.
down,
Yeah.
depth, and then motivation. And there are some coaches. It's one of those things where like, oh, Andy Reid off the bye, everybody knows that. That doesn't always work. Like Zimmer and Harbaugh in the preseason, that's just always going to work somehow because they care. They want to win those games. There are teams that care. There are teams that don't care. Pete Carroll, other way around.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on to our reigning NFC runners-up. the
Two-time
Green Bay
reigning NFC runner-up.
Oh shit! I forgot about that.
Remember, we bet the Niners pretty heavy in that 2 years ago.
I know. I bet you. I wish I bet the Bucks last year pretty heavily. That was just a great spot. I mean, really, like we got to give the Bucks more credit. That was their third game in a row on the road in the playoffs, and they went and they waxed their asses. It was a very, very compelling win, I thought, from the Buccaroos in that one. Green Bay Packers, two years in a row under the Matt LaFleur regime, have won 13 games both years. Last year was punctuated by an Aaron Rodgers performance of the ages, reminding everyone that he is still a top-tier NFL quarterback in winning the MVP. Coming from behind to win the MVP, he was you could have gotten 10-1-ish midway through the season. It was still a Pat Mahomes, Russell Wilson type of conversation halfway through the season, and then Aaron Rodgers came through and he cleaned them all up.
Russell, they were. I mean, people in the media were building a trophy case for Russ after 5 weeks.
Some of us who had Russell Wilson tickets were extremely excited about his opportunity to win, and he did not. That said, it was not for long that they had hopes of getting to the Super Bowl. They win a comfortable playoff game against the Rams. Actually, going back to their regular season, this is not a team I bet on a ton. And a couple of times I did bet on them, they let me down, and I got super angry about it. So I was pretty bitter about this team, and they're just in general, like I'm angry. I'm a little angry. Although I faded them a couple times down the stretch and got some nice prices. Carolina Panthers comes to mind. Jacksonville Jaguars comes to mind. Like they eked out wins against the bad teams. And then they stepped up their quality of play when they needed to against some of the good teams. The notable exception being that super duper duper soft game that they played in Lucas Oil Stadium against the Indianapolis Colts, which I will never forgive them for. And then they get to the playoffs as the 1 seed. You think, oh my gosh, Aaron Rodgers is going to host the NFC title game for the first time ever in his career. Tom Brady comes to town and they hang a 31-26 defeat on their feet. And really the Packers did a lot of that to themselves. A lot of coaching miscues in that game. A lot of fumbles, penalties, blown coverages. Like it was a sloppy day. It was a bad day to have a bad day if you were a Green Bay Packer player. And really, Aaron Rodgers was fine in that game. Everybody just kind of let him down, including the coach who kicked a field goal in the waning moments on 4th and goal rather than go for the touchdown down 8 points. That remains still one of the most head-scratching decisions in all of the playoffs, in my opinion. He made the one decision where you could potentially never get another opportunity to score a touchdown, which was
For the
giving
rest
the
of
ball
the
back
season.
for the rest of the season, giving the ball back to Tampa, on top of the fact that Tampa had shown an ability to move the ball pretty comfortably on your defense. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to say it was a failure of a season, but considering how well they played last year, considering how the season that they got from Aaron Rodgers, it felt like they should have gotten to the Super Bowl, especially being at home, more than a 3-point favorite in the NFC Championship game. And so despite it being generally good, it still felt like a failure. Am I being too hard on them?
No, again, like I said, I had a hard time digesting this team. Like, you go 13-3 2 years in a row, win your division 2 years in a row, go to the conference title game 2 years in a row, lose to some pretty good teams. I mean, it happens. And you get an MVP season out of a quarterback. I get you probably should be happy. Like, go ask a Jets fan how they'd feel about 2 years like that. Like,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Objectively, you should be happy as a franchise, but I don't know. It almost goes back to the McCarthy years, or even before that with Favre. Like, should a team like this be winning more than one Super Bowl? Should a playoff win or two be the floor for a team with this kind of player on it? What he did last year, especially, they were, like I said, they're 13-3 2 years ago. Rodgers wasn't that good 2 years ago.
No,
like, he was not.
And their remember their Pythag was off by 3 wins.
Yeah, it was like 10.3 or something for a Pythag win.
I had 9.7. I had 9.7, and they won 13.
What Rodgers did, he always has a great deep ball, and he's fine with decision making. But what he did in like the intermediate passing, I don't know. Like, it's one of those things where you can't quantify motivation. Maybe the Jordan Love thing did something. Honestly, like, I had somebody arguing about draft strategy during that with me. I should go find that guy, because he's like, no, this stuff's going to turn out good. None of it. Like, nobody they've drafted has contributed.
It's even worse than that, man. They have actively made this team worse 2 off seasons in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Actively. Between their draft decisions, between their free agency decisions, you said it off the top that not a lot really happened. Well, they didn't bring anyone in.
I was going to say, who's your favorite signing this offseason?
My least favorite signing was letting Corey Linsley walk. My least favorite signing is letting your awesomely strong offensive line, have a little bit of attrition here. I mean, is Kevin King still on this roster? He is, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, this is still no, he's
no,
gone.
I don't think he is.
Kevin King's gone. Okay, well, whatever the case is,
I'm gonna have to double check that.
We get into the offseason, and the changes were problematic.
Dan says he's there.
Kevin King he's actually still starting right cornerback. Oh yeah. He's opposite Jair Alexander is absolutely flat out awesome. Kevin King is a disaster. And realistically, like, there's a lot of issues, questions across and around this this team from a depth and talent standpoint. And you have squandered it. You have put yourself in a terrible situation by making poor draft choices now 2 years in a row. And I get why Aaron Rodgers spent the entire offseason dangling Green Bay, embarrassing them publicly, making them squirm. Like, he had no leverage to actually move on. None. Right?
Nobody wants to hang out with Miles Teller.
Miles Teller looks like a cool guy. I take
that back. He's probably an all right hang.
He seems like a cool hang. I mean, he knows good spots in Hawaii, I'll say that. But in general, to kind of put a little bit of pressure on this franchise and make it clear that you are unhappy with what they did in the last 2 off seasons is completely fair. And I'm not even saying like have a temper tantrum because they drafted your replacement in Jordan Love. Like, just the entire execution of how you populate a talented football team around a true top 2 franchise quarterback has been a failure for the Packers 2 years in a row. The vision is not there. Like it's not. Like why did you draft AJ Dillon? What was that about? You know, why did you trade up for Jordan Love? What was that about? You know, like there are a lot of highly questionable decisions that this front office has made now 2 years in a row. And I completely understand why Aaron Rodgers would be like, this sucks. I'm screwed. Not going to win a second Super Bowl here. And I know it. And I feel that the window was the last 2 years because their schedule was easy and their schedule is hard now. And they didn't shore up any of their weaknesses. Even bringing in Randall Cobb, that didn't move the needle for me at all. Valdez Scantling, Lazard, Funchess, St. Brown, even their draft choice, Amari Rodgers. Like these guys aren't NFL, ready number twos to put across Devontae Adams. Like it's not, I don't know. It's frustrating because Rodgers should, he should have a better steward. And, you wish or you wonder what might've happened if you had a Brady, Brady Belichick kind of a marriage for Rodgers, over the years between, with coach and GM who was making decisions that were correct or at least positive, moving your franchise in the positive direction over the years. And he's never had it. And he's going to probably leave Green Bay after this year with one Super Bowl. And I mean, I feel for the Green Bay fans who feel like, who probably rightfully feel like they should have gotten more out of it.
There's kind of two sides to the coin of, has anyone ever been as spoiled as a franchise for two long careered quarterbacks in a row? But on the other side, it's like, man, you probably should have had like 5 Super Bowls. Like, I'd rather have like maybe Elway, bottling it for a while and then getting a couple at the end. Or that's
sure.
I'm trying to think of a better example. A couple of people are throwing me off with the Miles Teller stuff in the chat. Whiplash was so good though. To be the yellow M&M and then to be that guy, J.K. Simmons, kind of a boss. It is a weird situation. I agree. He's probably gone after this year. The as much as nice things we said about the Lions and how they're building this roster right now, the Packers, it's just puzzling what's going on. I think
puzzling.
Rodgers is smart enough to know, like, these guys don't know what they're doing up there, or they're if they're doing it on purpose. I don't know. That's worse. But yeah, that made essentially no free agent.
If schmucks like us can tell you that you're fumbling your franchise, Rodgers certainly knows.
Yeah. So
certainly.
Yeah, and somebody, the Amari Rodgers, again, a good player on a high-end team. That was probably a decent pick. But it's probably a coin flip that his ceiling is a number 2 receiver, and it might not be this year, even if he does reach those heights. So finding that number 2 from an absolute fucking alpha number 1 is high on the list. Again, Scantling and Lazard are okay. Aaron Jones, very good. Bakhtiari, you have a really good left tackle. You have maybe one of the best. I was going to say maybe the best. One of the top few quarterbacks. You have one of the top few wide receivers.
Yeah.
You have some good pieces on the defense. Obviously, this is a good team. We're talking about them last. It's Wednesday night, and they're probably going to win the division again. But yeah, the spot, it's like when we talk about shit teams that need to get rebuilt and get to that spot where they can compete, teams in purgatory needing to decide if they need to go this way or that way. Are we tanking? Are we going for it? Can we make something of this or not? This is the kind of team, it's like you're in a different kind of purgatory where, and Rodgers, a couple more years, maybe only one with us. What are we going to do here? Is this not making moves and drafting the way we did? Is this how we get to the next step? Because you make all these conference title games, you need to at least get to one more step past that. And I don't think they did anything to differentiate themselves from a team from last year. And if Tampa Bay doesn't take a step back, if some of these teams out west take a little step forward, what makes you think they would make the conference title game this year? So Rodgers having as good of a year as he did last year, they still fell short again. Obviously, the Brady run at the end of the year was magical. That's not going to happen every year. But again, that roster is stacked. So again, I don't know what to say about this team that probably hasn't said 100 times already here. It's the same team as last year, minus a couple pieces. We'll see how the rookies play. they're going to win like 12, 13 games, and I'm not banking on them to go to the Super Bowl. When we get to odds, there's not much I'm going to be looking at there.
Yep, I agree with you. Last dance for Rodgers and Adams is, again, this makes your head hurt if you're a Packers fan. You're like, how could this be? Like, he's in his prime. He just got a freaking MVP last year. I guess, was that his last dance in reality?
Yeah. What if?
Do you think he can? Do you think he can repeat that level of production? Is it possible? Was that born out of the opponents they faced? Was that born out of just the situation that they were in last year? Things broke their way. Their division was weaker than expected. Minnesota and Detroit had off years. It was there was a lot of things that broke in their favor last year. Was he afforded some favorable situational factors that really got him there? Or do you think, because I read and I believe in a lot of the analysis that was done from the 2014 to 2018 timeframe, which really showed Rodgers was on the very clear and obvious decline. And he turned his career around, presumably on his own. I don't think it was the coaching. I don't think it was the scheme. Isn't it just as likely that he regresses at this year than is he has a repeat performance?
Yeah, I'm torn on this, and I think a lot of it depends on, in my mind, how I would approach it is like Tom Brady has played as long as he has. Other players are playing deeper into their careers, into their late 30s and 40s. Like, if he's of the mind that I'm going to play 3 more years somewhere else, I think he has an awful good year, because why would you slack? Why would you not try hard when when you're like I know there's a slight case for like, just stay healthy, do the Jared Goff thing, and I mean there is that. Then
or the Tom Brady thing.
The Tom Brady thing, yeah. But I mean, this is a much more talented roster. It's a very talented roster. He's very talented. So I think if he's done, which I don't think he is, I don't know what we'd see out of him. I do think you get full effort Rodgers. Maybe not to the levels of last year, but I think he's going to be good. You mentioned the schedule. We'll get to the schedule eventually, but just overarching theme is it's tougher than last year. And the team we just talked about, there was a lot of what ifs. And a lot of those what ifs were like, what if this is a 10 or 11 win team or better? If everything falls in place, the Vikings might be good. What if Justin Fields starts earlier than we think Nagy will get him out there and he turns out to be pretty good? He has an awful good receiver on that team as well. And they have some defensive players that are a little long in the tooth but can play. What if this division is instantly harder? And then you have the same tough NFC North schedule that everyone else is playing. The NFC West is going to be difficult. The AFC North is going to be difficult. Like, all of a sudden things do get a little sketchy, and honestly, you probably still win the division, but then you're just, like I said, you're not excited about this team in the playoffs again. You're treating them more like the Rams once they get there. Like, oh, it's just the Rams. Like, they might win a game, but whoever gets them in the second round probably takes it at home.
Oh, you're blowing the odds portion of the conversation, because I think that's right. I think that's how this goes. Let's get on to LaFleur. We sure he's good? We
called this, and anybody, and honestly, this guy sucks most of the time, but I do really, really like the rewatchables.
Sure.
You know which ones I like the ones the best? The ones that Bill's not on. It's like he's really, really trying to force everything into a basketball analogy now. He's up to 17 basketball analogies per hour. Honestly, He's fine. That's
fine.
High
usage. Yeah.
It is high usage. It's fine, but there's a segment on there called Unanswerable Questions. That's what this is. And we decided that before we got into this, but we said we should still discuss it. So he's 26. He's 26-6, 2 conference championship games. That's good.
Sure.
McCarthy won a Super Bowl with this guy. How hard can it be? Especially now that we've seen McCarthy outside of that, and the fact that he is, in complete arrested development. He's still stuck where he was 10 years ago. My only, and this is the exception to the rule thing that you get, everybody is going to remember that field goal. It got brought up on fucking Jeopardy, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
The field goal in the playoffs. We've brought it up already on this show. Everybody's going to remember that. But I want to give LaFleur a little bit of shine by saying that was the exception to the rule. he was actually a very aggressive coach on fourth down.
Yes.
One of the most aggressive coaches. And really, we're at a point where it's tough to tell how much of a team is talent slash offensive play calling, offensive coordinator. Like it's hard to tell, a lot about how a head coach does things outside of how a team reacts to his leadership. And I think that is actually one of the real measurables you can use now is this is a decision that's made by the head coach. Fourth down aggressiveness. That's something that will set a guy apart for me a little bit. Obviously, I'm not happy with the drama on the team, and I think he plays a part in that. But I have to give a lot of that to the front office as well. I can't just blame LaFleur for the Rodgers saga. So I give him an order of merit for fourth down aggressiveness, although he did botch it in the most important fourth down of the entire season. What do you have? Give me some negatives on him. I have a couple.
I mean, I don't have a ton of negatives really. I don't.
They're small. They're I feel like they're nitpicking, but at the end of the day, it's like, is he a good leader of men / schemer of teams?
Well, he's in on this rebuild, like ahead of the time. He was part of this plan to, the progression here to Jordan Love, which I don't feel like was great. Obviously you can put more of the noose around Brian Gutekunst, whatever you pronounce his name, Gutekunst's neck, than you can around LaFleur, but I didn't love the involvement in that. He obviously relied heavily on Mike Pettin to run a successful defense last year, which was not a great read as far as evaluating within your organization. They move on from Pettin to Joe Barry. I didn't love that hire. I don't have high hopes that Joe Barry comes in and has all the answers to make this defense, do anything other than middling. Even though they have a couple of players who are like all world talented. I am cautiously prepared to give him credit for coming up with a system that Rodgers bought into that was as successful as it was last year. But I also feel like some of the decision making, some of the kind of stewardship of a franchise is lacking. And I'm still stuck on the fact that the last two seasons they were just gifted this very, very easy schedule, and I think 2 years in a row of 13 wins has a tendency to crown the guy before we really know. And I want to be cautious before really getting involved here. And I had a cool temperature on LaFleur before he took the job because I didn't love what he did with Tennessee as the offensive coordinator. That wasn't great. So there are a couple red flags for me with him. And if he does it again this year with the more difficult schedule, and let's look at this, then I will acquiesce. I will own it. I will apologize, and then I will fade them next year with Jordan Love.
And the main negative is, and we kind of already said it, it's a tough one again to quantify or to ever prove out even 10 years down the road, because you can say, well, this coach is bad because he has bad talent around him. You can say, well, this coach is only good because he has Aaron Rodgers. It's hard to actually, proof that out. That's the main
there
negative.
Are a couple of guys we can say that one way or the other.
No,
wasn't he the same class as like Sean McDermott? Like I would go out on a limb and say Sean McDermott is good.
Yeah,
he's good.
No, I think there are coaches where you can definitely say like they improve talent. They take the talent and make it better, make the team gel. And kind of a bow on this one too is you kind of got to think of a head coach outside of just the leader of the team on the field. They're outside of those 60 minutes, 3 hours really a week. There's a lot of practices. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of other stuff. You have the whole off season. They're a middle manager. They have to be. Sure. They have to be a good middle manager. Middle managers get shit on all the time by upper management, and they have to be that branch, that piece, that connecting piece between the front office sometimes and the players. And
like
that's
Brian Flores.
Yes, exactly.
He was exceptional at that. Similarly, Frank Reich. I think is doing a very good job of that. Yeah, and I mean, those are guys that I would have higher confidence are going to be good for perpetuity than Matt LaFleur. Kyle
Yeah, and that's
Shanahan.
yeah, well, there's a good one. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying with the. I tried to put more on the front office, but at the same time, he needs to be a facilitator. He needs to be, understanding the psyche of the players and keeping this shit from spiraling out like it did. Sometimes it's just too much for the best of coaches to handle, and obviously you have a very big ego and a quarterback, no matter who the quarterback is. I don't say that in a negative connotation when I say ego. When you are a professional athlete, you're the leader of a team, you have to have confidence, ego. That's part of what makes you good. So it's probably difficult, but yeah, kind of undecided on him. It'll be interesting to see how the Jordan Loves era starts next year.
Yeah, let's look at the schedule. Now, keep in mind, if you're watching this live, these were the look-ahead lines that were released when Aaron Rodgers' availability was a giant question mark. So don't pay too much attention to the win percentages or the implied wins here. Let's just kind of focus on some of the sequencing and some of the other kind of killer aspects here.
It's the same sequence, or it's the same implied wins as Minnesota. That is incorrect at this point.
Yeah, right. And I want to start with the week 3 game, Sunday Night Football against San Francisco. I don't want to draw. If I'm them, I don't want to draw San Francisco early. I think that's not a great spot for them. Similarly, you got back-to-back Cincinnati. Chicago is your second back-to-back. You potentially are talking about the Justin Fields regime at that point, which I don't think is a great matchup for your defense. You have a couple of relatively. I said relatively. You have a couple very good defensive lines you're going up against. Back-to-back San Francisco, Pittsburgh, back-to-back Chicago, Washington. So Aaron Rodgers is going to be under duress 4 out of those 5 weeks, from week 3 to week 7. And then you got some tough, good offenses that you're going up against on the back half of this thing with Kansas City, the Rams, the Ravens, the Browns, and that stretch really at the end there where you got to play Seattle. You got to go at Kansas City. You get Seattle off their bye. You got to go at Minnesota. You got to play the Rams off their bye, and then Chicago, Baltimore, Cleveland off of your own bye.
And that's I didn't want to get ahead of myself when I started talking schedule, and I almost did, but I started to mention this. What if all the what ifs we went over a half hour ago on the Minnesota Vikings, if that defense is top 10, if the receiving core is as good as last year, if everybody stays healthy and that line's good, and Minnesota is a playoff team, a good team, maybe not great,
Sure.
Then you have stretches that go Kansas City, Seattle, Minnesota, Rams.
Yep.
And then Baltimore, Cleveland, Minnesota.
Yeah.
If Minnesota is a good above average team, those are some
those are filthy.
Awful. Yeah, filthy is a good word. Those are some rough stretches. We did say the schedules would be tougher. If they do get the magical catbird seed against Kansas City, I'd probably want that versus someone else. Although to be the best, you got to beat the best.
You got to go on the road though, too, second in a row on the road.
Yeah, so that's what kind of stymies that a little. You do get the team coming off Thursday night while you're coming off Thursday night extra rest. They're coming off Monday night short rest, but it is the second week of a back-to-back after returning from Arizona, so knocks that a little down. You get 2 opponents off the bye in that stretch where I mentioned Kansas City, Seattle, Minnesota, Rams. Both of the teams from the NFC West are off their bye. And then later in the season, you get to take care of business at home versus Chicago off your bye.
How many, what's wild? You don't get to dodge any of the league's best pass rushers, except for Joey Bosa, I guess. That's the only guy you don't have to go against.
And another thing I'm seeing too.
You got to go against Garrett. You got to go against Donald. You got to go against TJ Watt. You got to go against Nick Bosa. You got to go against Chase Young. You got to go against Danielle Hunter. You got to go against Khalil Mack. Who am I forgetting? I mean, that's the who's who of who is an elite pass rusher in the NFL right
Cleveland, now. Right there. Yeah, the Cleveland, Baltimore, Minnesota, Kofi. Yeah. Mack to Baltimore to Cleveland to Minnesota is not great. And another thing too, and a little bit dampered by Michael Thomas's unavailability. I'm seeing a lot of good receiving cores on there, and it's not just like, oh, you have a really good receiver on your team. You have a couple or 3 or 4. We saw that was a big problem with King. You mentioned King earlier. Like even what's his face, Scotty, what's his head, torched him. Like if that's
Scotty
like
Miller,
that's like your 4th receiver. And they did draft. We didn't really mention Eric Stokes. He got drafted in the late in the 1st round from Georgia. If he's not good and Kevin King is still your answer across from Alexander, you're gonna have some problems with some of these teams who have 2 to 3 really good receivers. San Francisco comes to mind. Pittsburgh obviously has a stable. You have Kansas City with speed all over, plus a tight end who's essentially a wideout. Minnesota has a nice duo. The Rams always have good receivers. Cleveland has a couple good ones. You get Minnesota again. Like if that second part of the secondary doesn't flesh out like you need it to, that's another big gaping hole that we saw exploited.
Yeah, and oh, by the way, Kevin King's on the NFI, so he's not even learning Joe Barry's system and getting better, presumably, in this preseason. So, yeah, no, this is like a secretly extremely difficult schedule. I feel like sequencing the way it breaks. This is going to be a tough ask for these guys to repeat what we saw last week. And let me just point out, week 5 to week 11. You have home game versus Washington, home game versus Seattle. Otherwise, you are traveling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those 7 weeks. That's tough in the middle of your season. You're playing 2 teams off of their buys. That's tough. This is going to be a challenge for them. So I think the expectations of them getting a 1 seed are low. I think them getting a 2 seed would be a stretch. This is a team that I think their ceiling, a good outcome for them this season is a 3 seed. An NFC North title. Let's look at the odds. We have in general expectations.
Were we down on all 4 teams in this entire division?
Absolutely. No, the winner. Yeah, the winner. Yeah, of course. The NFC is so freaking lopsided, man. It is the NFC East is a tire fire. The NFC North is a bunch of teams that have huge questions and problems or difficult schedules, and then the NFC South is the Bucs and a bunch of just dog shit defenses, and then the NFC West is great, just fire offenses. So it's a wild
Cardinals.
And the Cardinals, yeah. And it's a wild lopsided NFC this year, and it's going to make it fun to bet it week in, week out. I'm going to bet the NFC more than I bet the AFC. Would be my prediction. The Green Bay Packers are 14-1 to win the Super Bowl. That's super low. The NFC, they are 5-1. They are going to have to get the 1 seed to make that a realistic likelihood to win the NFC North. They are now minus 160. So congratulations if you got a plus money price when it looked like Aaron Rodgers was going to retire, or at least it was rumored that he was going to retire, because now it is minus 160. That's fair to me. To make the playoffs, yes, is minus 275. Again, I'll probably bet the Packers at some point this season if things are going sideways for them and they are down in the standings behind either the Bears or the Vikings by 2 games-ish. I'll probably look at their price and consider it if the timing is right. But at this point, these prices reflect way too much certainty that they're going to be just as good as last year, and I'm not sure that I believe that at all. The regular season win total at 10.5, minus 130 to the over, minus 104 to the under. What's your final prediction for this Packers record? What does your gut tell you?
Man, the more I stare at the schedule, like there's a decent shot at 10-7, 11-6. It feels like just the 10, 11, 12. Like it feels like the win total is just pretty spot on. It's going to end up really close. One of the teams that actually does end up close to their win total, and
unless Rodgers gets hurt and decides he doesn't want to play for this team, risking the next 3 years where he's playing for a team that has a chance to win the Super Bowl.
That's a good final point. If he suffers an injury that is like, all right, under normal circumstances, you could probably tough this out, or you could return after 2 weeks. Like there's a non-zero chance that he might milk that. Not like full Kawhi Leonard San Antonio, but you never know with quarterbacks in strange contractual situations here. So
Shoot,
it's
there's a non-zero chance
scary
he
team
wouldn't
like
mind throwing. There's a non-zero chance he wouldn't mind throwing Jordan Love into the fire this year and making a point to the Packers how not ready he is to take over next year and see if he can't get that $50 million from the Packers.
Oh my God, Lipscomb said Kawhi too. Somebody else mentioned Kawhi in the same
Kawhi.
breath. Look at that. Look at us. Simpatico, me and Sam Lipscomb in the chat. we said we're not betting this team, but earlier we did say we would. If the Vikings rattle off some wins early and Green
Yeah.
Bay is ho-hum, we will get involved in this team mid-season. That is the plan for now. But the best laid plans of men and mice are often thrown asunder.
Ooh, that's a great quote.
I don't know if that second part is actually part of the
Steinbeck
quote. I don't think it was him. He stole the part of the quote for the name.
Oh, okay. Best laid plans.
He stole and honestly, one of my favorite authors, but I think that was a quote before he took it. The Grapes of Wrath is part of it's a part of one of the lines from the Battle Hymn of the Republic. Like all that stuff's taken.
This is from To a Mouse by Robert Burns.
Yeah, there you go. Robert Burns poem.
Wow, how about that? All right, well, let's put a bow on this. NFC North is effectively on NFC North, unbettable. NFC North, not a factor in the ultimate NFC. Not a factor ultimately in the NFC in terms of who represents the National Football Conference in the Super Bowl, in my opinion. So, yeah, best case scenario, your winner of this division wins one playoff game and then gets throttled by a wild card team, probably, or a 2 seed, more likely on the road. Yeah. A 2 seed. Yeah, well, that's probably how this goes.
Yeah, heading out to LA, San Francisco, something along those lines.
Seattle even.
And you know what? Rodgers loses to a West Coast team, stays there. This is where I live now. That's what I always wanted. He does. His girl's she's a Hollywood girl now. So he went to Cal. Like, go move to the West Coast. You know you want to.
Who does Rodgers play for next year?
The Rams. Wow. That came
out
fast.
Wow.
The Stafford disaster.
Just because of LA?
I don't know, man. Maybe the Rams, out of those teams, if Fields doesn't work out, I guess maybe a Fields trade.
It makes more sense to stay in the NFC if you're him.
Yeah, the AFC's tougher. LA wouldn't be worse. I don't know, maybe a quarterback by committee with Russell Wilson. That'd be fun. Couldn't afford that. All right, LA. That's my official prediction. Clip it, Matt.
Okay. All right. Wow. Interesting. All right, man. Well, good stuff. Let's wrap it up. Good podcast. Good NFC North. Put it in the books. You ready to get into? You want to get into the most fun handicap next week? The next three. We've saved the three best for last.
Are all really good. I was talking to Dan about this.
For last. Yeah.
The next three are great. So yeah, thanks to Dan for putting up with us for the last hour and a half. Thanks to you. If you're in the YouTube chat, give us a thumbs up. If you listen to this in your car, I don't know, go rate and review. What do you do for podcasts here? Do people go to work anymore? You're working from home. Maybe put it on in your Alexa. I don't understand how that all works. But thanks to WinBet for the odds provided. And Drew, get out of here. You got things to do tonight.
I do, man. I got to go do 2 more meetings before I call it a day. So brutal.